There are nights when memories return not through images, but through scents. The scent of dried blood, the scent of rust, the scent of burnt dust amid the cracks in the wall. I woke in the middle of the night, my throat parched, and an invisible terror gripped my chest as if someone was sitting on my ribcage. The room was as silent as if someone had just sucked all the air out of it. The clock on the wall read 2:33 a.m. Before I could understand anything, the screen of my phone lit up. A message. Elevator, 3 o'clock, building 27 Ashvale Street. If you still want to see me again. I was stunned. That was Emily's phone number. My younger sister, the one who disappeared 3 years ago on a rainy night, leaving no trace whatsoever. An unexplained disappearance, with no body, no culprit, no hope. All that remained was the grey hoodie she used to wear, stained with blood, found in the basement of an old apartment building, which now is exactly the address sent in that message. I tapped the screen. The message vanished. No history, no trace, as if it had never existed. I stared intently at the word Ashwell, an ordinary street name, but in my heart, it was haunting. Memories came flooding back like water breaking through a dam. That night, Emily had called me 13 times. The last message she sent was, "Hey, is someone at the door?" I did not read it. I was busy with my girlfriend, and I turned off the phone. I chose to turn my back. Now she turns back and asks me one thing. If you still want to see me? 3 o'clock in the morning. I put on my coat, laced up my shoes, and merged into the dark night. I arrived on Ashvale Street at 2:59 a.m. It wasn't raining, but the ground was still wet. The air carried an old, musty scent, as if the entire street had been pulled out of time and forgotten. Building 27 stood between two modern skyscrapers, like a ghost unwilling to leave. Abandoned for more than 10 years, it looked like a concrete scar, dark, decayed, and covered in moss. Every window was dark, like the empty eye sockets of an unburied corpse. No security, no barriers. I stepped through the broken gate, treading on a layer of broken tiles. My shoes echoed crack, crack in the silent lobby, each sound stretching as if in a well. In the middle of the lobby was the elevator. Old, rusty. The light was off. The stainless steel door was deformed, as if someone had struck it forcefully from the inside. I stood before it, suddenly realizing that my hand was trembling. Memories came flooding back. 3 years ago, after Emily disappeared, the police had come here. I'd come too, but only to stand outside and watch. An unsolvable case. No trace, no witnesses, and I did not speak the truth. I glanced at my phone. 3 a.m. I took a deep breath, stepped into the elevator, and looked at the worn-out control panel before me. The shattered screen, the peeling buttons, but still enough to see the faint sequence of numbers. I began the ritual. What was once considered an urban legend game. But something inside me knew clearly. This was not a game. I pressed in the order 4, 2, 6, 2, 10, 5. Each button emitted a small sound. Tack, tack, tack. Like the sound of a lock turning to open a very ancient door. The elevator vibrated slightly. The ceiling light flickered, then went completely dark. I was swallowed by darkness. The elevator started moving. Each time it stopped, it was like a slight collision, as if someone from outside was trying to open the door. But no one stepped in until it stopped on the 5th floor. The door slowly opened. The elevator door creaked open with a prolonged shriek, like the broken neck of a creature forced to twist backwards. 5th floor. The light from the hallway outside flooded in. Not neon light, but a sickly white light, cold and dry, like the light in a morgue. The faint scent of formalin lingered in the air. It sent chills down my spine. She stood there, the strange woman, wearing a long white dress that touched the ground, soiled as if it hadn't been changed for a long time. Her long hair covered her face. Her skin was so pale it was nearly transparent, revealing bluish veins beneath. Barefoot. I stood motionless, my heart beating so fiercely I thought it would burst out of my chest. The first rule in the elevator ritual. If a strange woman enters the elevator on the 5th floor, do not look, do not speak, do not react. She did not step in immediately. She stood there, her head slightly tilted to the left, as if listening for something. Then slowly, like a wooden puppet pulled by strings, she stepped into the elevator one step at a time. The floor vibrated slightly as she stepped up. Each step was accompanied by a creaking sound, the sound of bones and joints colliding. She stood right beside me, close enough that I felt a cold breath on my cheek, as if someone was standing right next to me, whispering. I closed my eyes. I must not look. A whisper echoed, as if reverberating through many floors of water. You are the last one who saw that little girl, aren't you? I tried not to react, but my ears began to ring. The blood in my head felt as if it were being squeezed. When she called, you turned off the phone. That voice was no longer a woman's. It was distorted, hoarse, like a beast gnawing on every word with its claws. She was talking about Emily. I stepped back, not daring to open my eyes. She moved closer. If you hadn't lied, they wouldn't have given up. I almost wanted to scream, but then the elevator shook violently. The floor seemed to crack. The lights flickered wildly. A cold draft surged up from beneath the floor, as if from a tomb. I opened my eyes. She had vanished, but not gone out. I heard a soft laugh from the ceiling. I looked up. 4 pale white fingers clung to the metal bar above, as if someone were crawling upside down on the ceiling. I jolted. My heart tightened. The elevator shook again. The display flickered. 6th floor, 7th floor, 8th floor. Without pressing any button, it continued to go up. I had never pressed the 11th floor, but when the door opened once more, the display read, Floor 11, in red. The elevator door opened. Before me was an endless corridor, tiled with grayish-white tiles, the ceiling lights flickering intermittently like a heart monitor in an emergency room. There was no sound of people, no sound of fans, only the sound of the elevator closing behind, a dry and desperate sound. I turned around. There was no call button. There was only one path, straight ahead. On both sides were heavy iron doors, numbered randomly, like in a dream. A few doors were leaking blood from the gap underneath, thick, dark blood flowing slowly like rusty machine oil. There was some sound from inside, agonized crying, the scraping of nails against wood, the whisper of lament in a language that did not exist. I walked past each door, my legs heavy, as if carrying stones. My throat tightened. The air grew denser, not with dust, but with memories. At the end of the corridor, a different door appeared, a black door, unnumbered, without a handle. On the door was a scribbled drawing of an eye crossed out. I did not know why I reached out to touch it, but a door opened by itself. Inside, it was my living room. I was frozen in silence. It wasn't just similar, it was exactly that room where Emily and I lived. The faded silver sofa, the bookshelf with broken legs, the old picture frame with a photo of two siblings smiling broadly on the beach. But everything was distorted. The walls were smeared as if someone had sprayed acid. The sofa was half burned. The windows were nailed shut, and outside was pure darkness. I trembled as I stepped in. A wall at the back was scraped and torn, clearly the marks of a small, frail, blood-covered child's hand. And right in the middle of the wall, written in dried blood, were the words, 2142. Get out of the house. I called 13 times. No one answered. I wanted to step back, but the lights flickered. The air was as thick as glass. And then, a broken voice echoed behind me. Do you remember why you left the house that night? I turned around. Emily. Emily stood before me. No, that thing looked like Emily. Long black hair, a small face, eyes, once innocent and bright like an autumn lake. Now, like a bottomless pit. She wore her high school uniform, that white shirt which she used to wash by herself, neatly pressed. On her feet were still the silver sneakers I used to mock as rural. Emily looked at me. No reproach, no sorrow, just silence. Silence as if the very silence of that year were reflecting back. I wanted to say something, but my throat tightened. Do you remember what you did that day? Her voice echoed, light but cold. I dared not answer. That day was Friday. You had your semester exam. The final subject, advanced mathematics. I nodded slightly. Memories flooded back. The evenings when Emily diligently studied under the desk lamp, while I lay around playing on my phone, laughing with friends on Discord. You got a 9.75. The teacher even praised you in class. I pursed my lips. I remembered clearly. You came home excitedly recounting, even showing me your test, but I just mumbled, not bothering to look up, because at that time I was busy gaming with my friends. You said, what's the point of being good? Studying is no fun anyway. Remember? I looked down at the floor. My feet were soaked with sweat. That night, Mom was working the night shift. You were home alone. You were scared. I gasped. You promised you'd be home by 9 o'clock, but until 10 o'clock, you still hadn't come. You called 13 times. Emily pulled the phone out of her jacket pocket. The screen was cracked, displaying a list of missed calls, all with my name. Where are you? I replied, as if confessing. I was at karaoke with some friends. Were there any girls? I froze. There were. Emily nodded slightly. When you called, you turned off the phone because you were afraid your girlfriend would get angry. Yeah. Silence stretched on. Then Emily lowered her voice. When you didn't answer, I was very panicked. I didn't know who to call. Mom wasn't home. None of your friends answered. I thought, maybe you were out buying food or drinks nearby for me. So I went downstairs to look for you. But when I got to the lobby, a woman called me back. She said, you were at building 27 on Ashvale Street waiting for me. I didn't understand why. But when she said that, I believed her. My heart pounded wildly. My face turned numb. You walked out here with your phone. You still thought, maybe you wanted to surprise me. A prank, an apology. But when I arrived, the rusty iron gate was already open. And then, the elevator opened by itself. There was no one. No you. No lights. Nothing at all. Only the 11th floor. Her voice trailed off. The 11th floor doesn't exist. You know that, right? I nodded, tears streaming down my cheeks. Emily gently touched my chest, where my heart was racing wildly. But this place is more real than hell, and I have been here for 3 years. I burst into tears, collapsing. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I cried like never before. Every tiny tear fell onto the cold floor, soaking into the memories like blood flowing back through time. Emily said nothing more. She turned away. The door behind her opened. Red light shone brightly. Before stepping in, she said, "If you truly want to atone, keep going. And do not look back." The door slammed shut, and the hallway vanished. Only I remained, standing in the empty elevator with flickering lights and a button for floor B, a floor that had never existed, just appearing. The elevator stopped. The door opened. Before me was a hazy space. The wall behind the door was not made of concrete or bricks, but was a fabric wall, like a piece of black cloth stretched across space, extending endlessly. There was no light, no sound. Floor B is not a physical space. It is the realm of memories. It is my personal hell. I stepped out of the elevator, my hand reaching out in front as if to touch the dense air. My eyes had grown accustomed to the darkness, but nothing could have prepared me for what I was about to see. Before me was a room I never wanted to see. That room was my home, but it was a different version, a version filled with painful memories. The walls were smeared, the chairs haphazard, a study table covered with Emily's books, a faded family portrait. But the look in my eyes in the photo was full of regret. Emily was no longer there. She would never return. I stepped in. Emily still wasn't there, but I saw myself. A figure standing in the middle of the room. It was me. The me in memories, smiling happily, oblivious to my sister, unconcerned about her studies or sorrows. I was holding a phone, not to call her, but to text with my friends. That portrait reappeared, the last picture taken before Emily disappeared. But this photo was no longer a happy memory. It was a reflection of indifference. The me in the photo, I saw it staring at me, and I stared back. You didn't want her to die, Emily. You know it. My voice echoed in the empty room, but no answer came from Emily. A laugh, not mine, not Emily's. A familiar voice, but distorted. If it weren't for you, she would have never had to go down there. I turned around. Standing in the corner of the room was the woman from Ashvale Street. Her, but not really her. Her long hair wrapped around her neck, eyes without pupils, and a smile stretching all the way to her ears. She laughed loudly, like a monster about to devour me. Everything is your choice. My heart pounded. Cold sweat broke out, my body trembling as if afflicted by illness. Emily chose death to show you this. She called you, but you didn't answer. She cried, but you didn't care. And now, she'll be trapped here forever, along with your memories, forever unable to escape. She stepped toward me, her filthy hands reaching up to touch my face, cold as ice, sinking me into terror. You know, if you don't turn back, If you continue to be obsessed with meaningless things, she will never have a chance to be saved. She will live on floor B, in this place, forever. The door behind opened. For a moment I saw Emily standing behind the faint light. "Will you save me?" Emily called. But her voice was no longer like her own. It was shattered, laden with pain in every word. The door widened. A choice: to turn back or to keep going. Floor B is not a place. It is my soul. Everything I have neglected. I was too late. But there was one last chance. To turn back and save Emily. Or to keep going. To remain here forever. The door behind me closed. The space was silent. Only the sound of my heavy breathing, beat by beat. This was the moment of decision. Everything I had ever done, everything I had ignored, every choice I made, now was all laid bare before me. Emily, my younger sister whom I loved and yet had callously abandoned. I looked back at the door. It was open, but it was not the real world. It was the door leading to the memories I wanted to bury. I saw Emily once more. Emily stood behind the faint light. "Will you save me?" Emily called, her voice weak. But that was not the Emily I knew. Emily was now a different version. Not the well-behaved, studious sister. Not the Emily who always smiled. She was the embodiment of pain, of abandonment. I stepped toward the door. Each step was a heavy burden, a moment of hesitation. Both of my hands gripped the door, but it did not open as I expected. "Why? Why can't you save me?" Emily called again, but this time her voice was no longer weak. It was like an indictment. I stopped. My throat tightened. Had I been too late? Everything, every fear, every terrible dream I had endured, all shattered like a painting torn apart. I was wrong. I had been wrong for a long time. The dark figure standing in the corner laughed mockingly. "You think you can save your innocent little sister? She has fallen into the hands of fate." That was the laugh of the woman. Her, the very one who had led Emily into this world. She was drawn here by your own indifference. And now, she will remain here forever. I could no longer bear it. Anger surged within me. "No, that's not it." With all my remaining strength, I forcefully pushed the door. Light shone like a ray of hope piercing through the darkness. But I saw no sign of Emily anymore. No sign of the dark figure. There was no one. Only the woman. Now she stood before me, but not in the form I had imagined. Her long hair disheveled, her eyes as deep as black pits, and a grotesque smile full of triumph. She stepped forward, the weak light from the elevator only illuminating part of her face, but enough for me to see every wrinkle, every crack on the face that was no longer human. "Do you think Emily is still alive? Why is she still here?" "Emily is dead, my son. Dead for a long time, in your very soul." The image of Emily that I saw, it was a distorted image, the deceit used by her to lure me here. You can no longer save her. Her voice was heavy, like a verdict. I stepped back, my heart constricting as if gripped by an invisible force. A wave of dizziness overwhelmed me. The death I once thought was a challenge, a mystery, had now become reality. But you can choose another way. You can follow Emily. Go to a place where neither of you will suffer any longer. I stood motionless, hearing only the beating of my heart in my chest. In that moment, perhaps I had truly lost Emily. Emily could not come back. She was no longer here. Suddenly, I realized everything I had done, every missed chance. That was the gradual, decaying death of Emily. Even as I remained unaware, she did not die because of me, but because of my own indifference and neglect. I turned around and stepped toward the elevator. Light shone. Emily was gone, and I knew what I needed to do.